Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the session of LitFestX. We're joined by Aliyyah Eniath from the Caribbean. She stays in Trinidad and Tobago, and this is her first novel called The Yard. Aliyyah is, of Indian origin. Her great grandmother migrated to the Caribbean.
Kumar, it's lovely being here, having being in Trinidad and Tobago and having this opportunity to talk to you guys on a platform like this, and for the very first time about my novel, The Yard, which has been thus far my best kept secret. So now it's out. So thank you for having me.
Sure. You know, I had mentioned in your introduction that this is really from the perspective of East Indians whose forefathers were brought to Trinidad from India through the British colonial indentureship scheme in 1845. Now, obviously, this is a novel, and this is not so much of a work of history, but I'm sure readers would be interested in knowing what has been the overall backdrop and the sort of core narrative in this novel with respect to indentureship or with respect to the views and lives of persons of Indian origin who sort of migrated there and then future generations.
Right. Well, we came to Trinidad as part of the British indentureship scheme, which means that most likely my forefathers would have come to Trinidad searching for a better life, for better opportunities maybe. And the British I think slavery was just abolished, and this was around 1834. And they were looking basically for new laborers, and they would have promised all sorts of attractions here in Trinidad, and then my forefathers would have come here. But this is a sort of a historical context for my upcoming novel, The Yard, in the sense that it really informs the characters and the overall framework of the plot, and it's really my personal and subjective view of being an Indo-Muslim living in the Caribbean, third generation, and it really did inform the work a lot. For instance, in the novel, the characters, they all live in a communal compound, and it's called The Yard, and that's where the novel gets its name, The Yard. So it's a family compound, and really among the East Indians here, everything sort of revolves around family, because it's just a very close-knit sort of society. And the Yard is this family compound, and the whole conflict in the novel is when one of the father figures or in the Yard, he wants to adopt this boy, and there are a lot of problems, and there's a lot of resistance from other family members who don't necessarily want to adopt this boy that they really don't know anything about. And they have many reasons for not wanting to adopt him. And that is cultural, of course. You don't know anything about him. We live so closely together. This is a stranger. This is an outsider. And also religious, because, and I don't think many people know this, but also as being of a Muslim faith, adoption is not really something that you condone, in the sense that an adopted person would be adopted in the West, in the sense that as a Muslim, if you adopt someone, you can't really, because you can't claim another child as your own, or you can't give that child your name. And so there's this whole conflict going on about what is the right thing to do, and that really is the initial conflict in the plot in the novel. And so it's a lot of personal experience going into that sort of thought, and it also drives a point. One of the things that I really wanted to touch on is when you're faced with an opportunity and when you must make a decision, okay, am I adopting this boy or not? Are you going to do the right thing that your heart tells you is the right thing, the noble thing, the thing done out of love, or are you going to do what others say you must? What is the cultural thing to do? What might even be the religious thing to do? What even God says to do? Or are you going to do what you think in your heart is correct? So in the book, the boy is adopted into this family, and it's all about the consequences, what happens next. But
Right.
yes, all of it is influenced by that Indo-Muslim experience here in Trinidad.
Right. And what really inspired you to write about this entire experience and this story? What was your one big inspiration?
Well, I've always thought, and I still think, that one of the most noble, loving things to do would be to adopt a child, because face it, there are so many children suffering. You see it day in and day out. Like kids, they suffer so much sometimes, and they have no one to take care of them. So I thought it was a very noble thing. And I was actually speaking with someone in my circle, who was in my circle at that time, and I said, you know what, I think this is just a great thing for anybody to do, without really thinking to myself all the socio-religious implications of what I was saying. To me, it was just a normal, natural thing to think or say. And the person looked at me and he said to me, but you really can't. And as Muslims, we don't. This is just forbidden. Of course, that sort of thinking is more to me fundamentalist. In putting aside love and following the strict, narrow path that they say you must do all these things. But it just occurred to me that there was no way that showing or giving love could not be desired by God or some fate. It was no way that this was possible. So I wanted to write, and then and there I decided that I wanted to write about a boy who was adopted into this family against all odds, and with everyone against him, and and see how he fares. So that was really the inspiration behind the novel. But always, I would write what I want to read. So I love reading romances. And so I would consider this a literary romance, because when he is eventually adopted by these people, and he of course would get himself into some trouble with a girl who lives there. And of course that will spiral again into a whole family drama. So it's really a family saga based on that whole interaction.
Right. You come from a Indo-Muslim family in Trinidad and Tobago, and clearly there must have been experiences, the culture, your surroundings, which would have sort of influenced both your work and your sort of overall views. So tell us a little bit about how that influence has come about.
How sorry, how it has influenced my views as an Indo-Muslim?
Yes. And
I
your work. Yeah.
I identify as Indo-Muslim because that's what I am, but I also identify as a human being in the world, and I really don't like this sort of feeling globally and in the Indo-Muslim community, even here in Trinidad. I really don't like this sort of feeling that that religion or God or spirituality or whatever is a set of rules to be followed so strictly, where you sort of leave off the heart element. That is my biggest issue. There must always be heart. There can't be religion without heart, because then you get ISIS, and you get terrorism, and all sorts of things, and these all come from fundamental beliefs that people don't put in context, or they don't view or see clearly. And I am not writing about religion. I'm just writing about influences that happen globally and happen here, because we are a microcosm of the whole world here. We have all different races and ethnicities and everything here. So I'm just writing about what's happening, and the general feeling of how it's going for Muslims now, and just putting it into a human context, because the story is very human. It doesn't deal with the big issues on a grand scale, but it's just a very human feeling of how people will suffer, or how their lives will change, or what could become of them when these religious or even cultural burdens are placed on them, and how they deal with those changes and eventually resolve them.
Right. You mentioned your views on religion, but clearly there's obviously been some role that religion has played in the narrative of the book, and in some of the characters. Tell us about some of those characters, and the entire backdrop and the interplay of religion there.
Well, the book, well, we have two protagonists. It's the boy who was adopted, and then his adoptive sister Maya. And I loved writing about Maya because she was particularly rebellious and particularly interesting, and there was nothing predictable about her. And when the adopted boy comes into the family, then that this rebellious girl and this boy, they're eventually going to cause some problems, and when they grow up, they're going to be involved or in love, and it's just going to be problematic for her, him being there. And there were so many naysayers, and of course they impose all these views on these little kids, and then the kids grow up, and obviously they do, as their naysayers say, they do fall in love, and you can imagine the controversy. So they, of course, that is not allowed to happen. So they would have to part ways. But religion does play a part, because you have all these religious views, you tend to be judgmental, one, in the book, right? You tend to be judgmental because there are things that should and shouldn't be done. And two, when you constantly accuse somebody, even a kid, of something that they haven't even done yet, you're setting them up to do it maybe. And this is what happens to the characters in this book. They become so influenced by this whole society around them. And then towards the climax of the book, something major happens. And it really happens because Maya, my rebellious girl, she's trying to be on her best behavior, but you can't always please everyone, and something happens because of religious hate or intolerance towards her. And this event, which I wouldn't actually know exactly what it is, but this event propels us towards a resolution. And both she and the adopted boy, they both have to leave this family complex called the Yard. They both need to leave, whether on their own or together. So that's where it is. It's in the family complex, the Yard. It can consume you, and you can ache to be away from it, and it can be a bit too much, So that's where it is with that interplay of faith and culture and religion and all that. But what do you think so far, Kumar? What do you think about it? Am I interviewing you now?
Of course. So you also had mentioned that there is a love story which is at the center of the book, and really you've got a lot going on in the book. There's the interplay of religion, then there's this whole sort of history that you've delved into, And how is the love story coming into play then within this backdrop?
Right. So the love story, I think, is the essence of the plot, because essentially there are these two people, this boy and this girl, that they grow up together, and they are attached, but because of circumstances around them, and because of what the auntie says and the uncle says, and the controversy of this boy even being adopted, they can't really find that ground to be together. It's impossible. So along the way, they part ways, and it's tough. And they build their own lives together and apart from each other. But in the end, with this incident that I told you about before, from religious hate, it affects them both, and it draws them back together again for a resolution. So in the end, they can leave together or they can leave apart. The reader would have to read the book to see what happens. But it's very emotional, and it's a very human story, and I think I would describe it as either literary romance or family saga. And I would just like to leave it open to hear what the readers have to say when it comes out, and hopefully there would be some sort of new perspective or some new thought gained by this whole experience, of this Indo-Muslim family living in an island in Trinidad. It's an island nation, and how critical these things like family, culture, religion are for them and those around them, and how it can possibly play out in their lives.
Right. We are almost at the end of the session, Aliyyah, but I'm seeing some questions on Twitter from our viewers. We'll probably take one question. It's going to show up on your screen, and then you can respond to it. So it says, which parts of the story have you learned from society, be it history of one society or world societies?
Which parts of the story have I learned from society? I think now I would have to say the story is mainly through my experience living in Trinidad as part of this society, but I also have to say the world, because realistically, we're living now in a global village. We're no longer isolated from each other. So whatever happens globally impacts us here as well. And on the point of religion, we do have imported scholars coming from Saudi Arabia and different parts of the world, and coming here and preaching faiths, and we have an interchange of knowledge. And so I would say both. I would say that we can't help but be influenced by world society at this point.
We'll take one more question. So here it is, and it says, what kind of perspective does it add to narration when you find yourself emotionally attached to a story like yours?
Wow, that's a good question. How does it add to narration? For me, writing is personal. As a kid, I would experience something and immediately the words are formed, or feeling, or just an intense impression. And I could not possibly have written this novel if it wasn't intently felt. There's no way that words are going on a paper if I don't feel the impression of something. So it's because of this emotional attachment to the novel that it was even written at all. And I did spend about 5 years working on it, 5 or 6 years, and the emotional attachment forms every plot line and leads to every word ever written. So that is the key to my writing.
Right. Aliyyah, clearly this is a book whilst set in Trinidad and Tobago, and sort of delving into your experiences living there, as an Indo-Muslim. But like you mentioned, this is in many ways a story of a person in a global village, because you've got this entire element of an East Indian sort of coming into Trinidad and Tobago because of the British sort of action. And you know what should readers be expecting? So, what is the kind of tonality? What is the messaging, or what is the feeling that readers should be expecting from this upcoming book?
The tone is not literary, and it's not commercial either. It's sort of hitting that sweet spot between literary and commercial fiction. I would call it accessible literary fiction, because you can delve into it pretty well without having to think too much. And it's not stylized literary work at all. It's sort of that sweet spot between literary and commercial. And the tone, it's like a drama, a family saga. So all of these important issues aside, it's just a story. It's just a story that you can connect with, where you can connect with the characters and where you can follow along. And I think it's emotionally impactful. I think it will be. For the very few people who've read it so far, did cry at some point. So I think I think I was going more for that sort of drama, that sort of storytelling, rather than dealing with all these issues. The issues just happen to crop up because they form part of my experience.
Right. Well, that brings us to the end of this wonderful session with you, Aliyyah. And thank you for joining us from the Caribbeans. And we really look forward to your book, and I'm sure it will do very well. And we wish you all the success.
Thank you so much, Kumar, and thank you once again for this wonderful, wonderful opportunity.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.